Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We are holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav. We'll be learning today Mirz Hashem Daf Lamed Zayin Amud Beis. And we begin today a brand new Siman Tovkov Samach Aleph Din Haraya Are Yehuda Yerushalayim, the halachos that pertain to one who sees the cities of Yehuda. That means the cities of Eretz Yisroel that were part of the chelik of Yehuda, the portion of Shevet Yehuda, Yerushalayim, or somebody who sees Yerushalayim, HaMikdash, somebody who sees the Makom HaMikdash bechurbanan, in their state of destruction. Ubai he seifim, and here we have 5 seifim. And of course, we're going to have to define all of these terms. What's the Are Yehuda, what's Yerushalayim, what's the Makom HaMikdash, and what does it mean bechurbanan? So says the Mechaber here in Sif Aleph, Haraya Are Yehuda bechurbanan, somebody who sees the cities of Yehuda in their state of destruction. Omer, he says, Kach Are Kachacha Hayu Midbar, your holy cities have become like a midbar, they've become desolate like a midbar. This is a pasuk from Yeshaya, the kria, and then he writes his kria. So let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Aleph. The Mishnah Berurah says, Are Yehuda, V'loi Are Yisroel. This only applies to one who sees the cities of Yehuda in Eretz Yisroel, not to somebody who sees any of the other cities in Eretz Yisroel, D'loi Chashivi Kol Kach, because they're not quite as chashuv as the cities of Yehuda. Some of the Achronim bring down, not that the cities of the rest of the Shvatim are not Kadosh, they certainly are Kadosh, but the Ikr Melucha, the Malchus based David, was based in the Are Yehuda, and therefore when we're remembering the Churban Bayis, we give precedence to the Are Yehuda, and it's when we see that the Are Yehuda that we particularly have to feel a sense of mourning. Now the question becomes, what exactly is the status of the Are Yehuda nowadays? So there's a very interesting Shari Tshuva over here. If you take a look at the Shari Tshuva, he says here, V'kasav Birkei Yosef, the Birkei Yosef writes, B'shem Moiri Zikni Harav Bal Chesed La'avram Shekasav Nagu Ha'olam, the accepted minig seems to be, Shaloi L'kraya Al Chevron Tibana V'sikainen B'meher V'yamenu, that people do not rise kria when they see the city of Chevron. Shamati b'shem gedolim, lefisha Chevron may are miklat shidnitnu v'lav may are Yehuda mikria. That somehow Chevron was not really called one of the Are Yehuda. It was an miklat. The kasav begilion barbrate Rav Agadol b'doyrei Mareno Rav Rabbi Avram Yitzchak Zal shedvarim chalushim heim ad kad l'shainai. He doesn't like this opinion. He says that these words are very weak. Now there's a footnote here, the Dirshu footnote number 1. They write like this: How about the status of the Are Yehuda nowadays? Somebody goes to visit Eretz Yisroel and he sees Are Yehuda. Does he say this pasuk? Does he write kria? Kigoin Chevron, for example, Chevron. Berurah Urei Shari Tshuva Sif Katan Aleph, the Shari Tshuva that we just read. Kasav B'Sefer Eretz Yisroel from Rav Tuzinski, She'ein Noyagim L'Kraya B'Riyasan, that the meaning is not to write kria when you see the Are Yehuda. Why? Kevan She'ein Yodua B'Vadas Mekayman Shel Are Yehuda Shahayu V'Nechrevu. We can't be certain when we're in Eretz Yisroel nowadays that we know what really is Are Yehuda. We don't know the boundaries. We don't know for sure what constitutes Are Yehuda. And therefore, Rav Tuzinski writes that we don't write kria on Are Yehuda. However, if you look further in this paragraph over here, they bring down from the Yeshiva Zatzal, from Rav Moshe Zecher Tzaddik Kadosh Levracha, Meidach, on the other hand, B'Shalos Utshuvas Igros Moshe, Mashma Shekarim Alein Af Bizmanenu, the implication from the words of Rav Moshe is that we do write kria when we see Are Yehuda. I'll speak about this more as we go on. So the Mechaber has introduced to us so far the concept of saying the pasuk of Ari Kachacha Hayu Midbar and writing kria over seeing the Are Yehuda b'churbanon. Says the Mishnah Berurah, cotton bays in their state of destruction. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Afilu yoshven behen Yisroel, even if Yidden are living in those cities. For example, let's say you go to Eretz Yisroel now. Baruch Hashem, you go to Eretz Yisroel now, for the most part, the cities that you go to don't seem to be b'churbanon. They're built up. We have Yidden living there. Looks like a Yiddish city. So do these halachos still apply? So the Chavetz Chaim, he was writing from his perspective during his lifetime. He writes, Afilu Yosherim Behem Yisrael, even if Yidden are living in those cities, these halachos still apply. Why? Kevan Yishmaelim Moishlam Alehem, since the Yishmaelim, since the Arabs are ruling over them, Mikri B'churbanon, this is still considered B'churbanon. Let's remember that in the times of the Chavetz Chaim, I guess at that point in time, Yidden that were living in Eretz Yisroel were living under the British, but the Muslims, the Arabs, were really the ones who held sway for the most part in those territories. And therefore, even though there are Yidden living there, the Chavetz Chaim says that's called B'churbanon. How about nowadays, when you have the state of Israel, and it's really, so to speak, a Yiddish, it's a Jewish government. So what's the status of those cities now? So if you take a look in the Dirshu footnote number 2, very interesting footnote, they write, Ubizmanenu, in our days, She'Yisrael Moishlim Yerushalayim, where Yerushalayim is under Jewish rule, Va'abatim Sheba Benuyim, and the homes and the buildings are built up, doesn't seem to be b'churbanon, and it seems to be under Jewish rule. Kasav b'shaylos etchuvas igris Moshe she'ein tzarich lekria ela im kein rayim mekaymais b'Arei Yehuda oy b'Yerushalayim she'ein b'rishus ha'umais. Rishiva Zatzal seems to write that this only applies to rice kria over Arei Yehuda and Yerushalayim. We're not speaking about the Makom HaMikdash right now. We're speaking about Arei Yehuda and Yerushalayim. Only to rice kria if you're looking at some place that is not under the jurisdiction of the Jewish government. Meidach, on the other hand, Hagayin Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach Kosav, Shekevan Shegam Bizmanenu, since even nowadays, Nimtzaim b'Yerushalayim Knesiyos, we find in Yerushalayim Nebuch b'Avodaseinu Harabim, we find churches, mosques, ukvarim and graves, shalnachrim of non-Jews, ve'en biyadeinu la'ikram, and we don't have the ability to uproot them. It's very nice. You look at Yerushalayim and you want to say that it's under the jurisdiction of a Yiddish government. Really? Is it really under our control? If it's really under our control, why is there a big gold dome on the Har Bayis? If it's really under our control, why are there big churches? So obviously it's not really under our control. It's very nice that the Umay Sa'olam, the non-Jews, have allowed us to set up a government over there. But how did we get that government? Yes, it's all Siyata D'Shmaya, but let's remember that government really came about by a vote in the United Nations. What happens if all the governments of the world decide, no, we want to change it? So we're not Moskim anymore. So do we still have control? Obviously, we feel that we don't have full control because there are things that we would do if we had full control that we don't do. So obviously, we understand that to a certain extent, we have to worry about world opinion. We have to worry about the opinions of other governments. So we're not really in control. So therefore, Nechsheves Yerushalayim Adayin B'Churbana, Yerushalayim still is considered to be in a state of destruction. So the opinion of Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, going to Yerushalayim nowadays, going to Arei Yehuda nowadays, it's still considered B'Churbanon, even though there's, so to speak, a Jewish government and it's built up. And this was also the opinion of the Stipler Goyen. Umitam she'af bezmanenu ein Yisrael sholta b'shlita machletes, and this is because, like I've said, that the Yidden don't have complete control. Machma she'em teluyim b'das ha'umos, because we still have to worry about world opinion. V'af b'shalosetshuva shevet halevi tzidei shekevet she'ashilton einoi b'yad shomer Torah u'mitzvos. The Shevet Halevi writes that while it's true that it's, so to speak, a Jewish government, but the ones running the government are not shomer Torah u'mitzvos. Ein nechsheves Yerushalayim shehi bebenuya. You can't consider Yerushalayim to be built up. Kol Zman that Yerushalayim is under a rulership that doesn't recognize Torah Misinai and is not Shomer Torah mitzvahs, that is not called Yerushalayim Habenuya. This is still B'Churbana. However, the Shevet HaLevi says that it seems to be the minhag of most not to rice kria on the Arei Yehuda and Yerushalayim outside of the Makom HaMikdash nowadays. And again, we're going to discuss this more as we go on. Okay, so here we had in the Mechaber, Haraya Arei Yehuda b'Churbanan Amir Arei Kachacha Yumidbar v'Karea. So you rice kriya when you see the Arei Yehuda b'Churbanan. Says the Ramah, Ve'enoi chayev l'kraya ela k'shemagia samach lehem. However, the obligation to rice kriya only applies when you come close to them, which the Ramah defines as K'may min hatzayfim liYerushalayim. In the context of Yerushalayim, what's called coming close to Yerushalayim? When you reach the area called Tzayfim, which again we're going to have to define what is this area of Tzayfim. Says the Mishnah is cut in Gimel, Kishemagia Samach Lehem. These halachos of kria and saying these psukim only apply when you come close to the Arei Yehuda. Because if you're further away than that, that's not called seeing the city. Kamoila halon, like we're going to discuss further when we speak about Yerushalayim. Well, if Imasha b'yarnu l'kamei and sivkat and zayin, says the Chavetz Chaim, according to what he's going to expand upon later on in this Siman in Sivkat and Zayin, the Kama Paiskim pligi alzeh, many Paiskim argue on this idea that you can only rice kria on Yerushalayim when you reach the area called Tzayfim. V'Sayvin, and they hold the Ein Shir L'Davar, that there is no exact measurement. Elo d'mimakam sharaya chayev l'kraya. As soon as you're close enough to actually see Yerushalayim, you have to rice kriya. Huadin be'inyanenu, the same halacha would apply to the Arei Yehuda. As long as you're close enough that you could actually see the Arei Yehuda, you would have to rice kriya. Okay. Now let's take a look at Siv Beis. Says the Mechaber. So far, we've spoken about Arei Yehuda. So that's one madrega. When you come to see any of the Arei Yehuda, there's this concept of saying the pasuk of Arei Kachacha Hayumidbar and rice and kriya. And as we've seen, there's a question what to do nowadays with the Arei Yehuda. Do we know what the Arei Yehuda are? Do we not know what the Arei Yehuda are? Seems to be that most people either don't rice kriya on the Arei Yehuda or they avoid the issue, and we'll see how. But now let's go to Siv Beis. Now we go to the next level. Says the Mechaber, Haraya Yerushalayim b'Churbana. If somebody sees Yerushalayim Nebuch in its state of destruction, Omer, he has to say the pasuk, Tzion Haisa Midbar Shemama. That's the way the Mechaber quotes the pasuk, Tzion Haisa Midbar Shemama. However, if you take a look at Yerushalayim, an accurate rendering of the pasuk is Tzion Midbar Hayasa. Tzion has become Nebuch HaMidbar. Yerushalayim is Shemama, and Yerushalayim is desolate. That's the actual text of the pasuk. So here the Mechaber introduces now the next level, which is if you see Yerushalayim in its state of destruction, there's a different pasuk that you have to say. And again, you're going to rice kriya. Now let's take a look here in the Mishnah Berurah is cut and daled. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Raya Yerushalayim. Yesh shekasvu, there are those that write, shemistabra, it makes sense. Sheyomi sharaya adam tchila Yerushalayim b'churbana. You go to Eretz Yisroel, the first day that you see Yerushalayim b'churbana, sheyesar oisei hayom kulay bebasar v'yayin. That day you should be noyeg iser. You should not eat meat and you should not drink wine. Something like the 9 days. If you go, so to many people it's a tremendous joy. He came to Eretz Yisroel. On the one hand, it's a tremendous joy to have the ability to come to Eretz Yisroel. On the other hand, you're coming and you're seeing Eretz Yisroel b'churbana. You're seeing Yerushalayim b'churbana. You're seeing Yerushalayim not the way Yerushalayim is supposed to be. So on that day, you don't eat meat and you don't drink wine. Dirshu footnote number 3 discusses the status of different areas of Yerushalayim. In the context of this halacha, what do we call Yerushalayim? The Yerushalayim achadasha shemichutz l'chaymos. the, so to speak, new Yerushalayim, the new city, outside of the walls. Kasav b'sefer Eretz Yisroel, again, Rav Tukhtinsky, she'ena nechsheves ki Yerushalayim le'inyan zeh. He says that the new city is not called Yerushalayim in the context of this halacha. Ve'en lekroya ela al re'iyas ha'ir shebein ha'chomos, and you only write kria on the old city, within the walls. Or re'iyas ha'chomos atzman, or at least on seeing the chomos. V'chein al re'iyas hartzion. V'chein kosa b'shal sechuv shevet halevi, she'ein dina ki Yerushalayim ela ka'arei Yehuda. The new city would have a din of Arei Yehuda. It wouldn't have a din of Yerushalayim. V'chein nagu ha'chazanish, and the Stipler Goyen, L'kroya b'knisa l'shar Yafai, b'shar shero es ha'ir ha'atika. They would write kria over Yerushalayim when they came into the old city. And now here we have a very interesting minig. Ubal ha'divrei yatziv, the Klosenberger Rebbe Zecher Tzadik v'Kadosh Livracha, who was mechaber the beautiful tshuvas of the divrei yatziv. Ubal ha'divrei yatziv ha'yarogil b'derech klal. His minig was latzoim es einav, to close his eyes. Kishehagia samach le'ir ha'atika, when they were approaching the old city, he would close his eyes. Ad she'gia le'kaisel, and he wouldn't open up his eyes again until he got to the kaisel, because he didn't want to see Yerushalayim until he came to the kaisel. V'sham kara, and then when he got to the kaisel, over there he writes kria over the Makom HaMikdash already. Because of this suffix of not knowing precisely when can we say that we have seen Yerushalayim and we have to write kria over Yerushalayim. What precisely is called Yerushalayim? So I know I spoke today to my friend Avi Feinstein, Rabbi Zolzain Gezund's son. I told him I haven't been in Eretz Yisroel since 1982. He's been in Eretz Yisroel more recently. I asked him what he does, what his father, Zolzain Gesund, does, and he told me that they avoid all of these issues by making sure that the very first place that they go, when they get to Eretz Yisroel, they go to the Kaisel, and they close their eyes. From the time that they reach, before they get to the old city, they close their eyes until they get to the Kaisel. And like we're going to see later in this year, in another Dirshu footnote, the Risher Zatzal, Rav Moshe, considered the Kaisel to be, when you see the Kaisel, he considered that seeing the Makom HaMikdash. And therefore you could write kria already and say the psukim that are negayat to the Makom HaMikdash. And once you see that, you covered all your bases. That's already, you consider that you were misabel on the Makom HaMikdash, on Yerushalayim, and on Arei Yehuda. Okay. Okay, so now let's go back into the Shulchan Aruch Siv Beis. So he said, Harai Yerushalayim b'charbana, Omer Tzion Haisa min bashmama. Now he continues and he says, Ukisharaya Beis HaMikdash. When you see the Makom HaMikdash, Omer, now you say another pasuk, Beis Kachenu v'Tefartenu, our holy house, the Beis HaMikdash, v'Tefartenu, our splendor, Asher Hilalucha Bayavisenu, where our forefathers praised you, Haya L'Sreif Aseish, has become burned by fire, V'chol Machmadenu Haya L'Charva, and all of our desires, all of our hopes and dreams, Haya L'Charva, have turned to destruction. Like we keep on saying, let's remember that in the absence of the Beis HaMikdash, without having the Rebbeinu Shalom's Shechina, Shruya B'Seichenu, we're not truly living the life of a Yid. So V'chol Machmadenu, all of our desires, all of our hopes, Haya L'Charva, they've all come to destruction. V'Karea, and you rice kria. So far now, the Mechaber has told us about mourning over the Arei Yehuda, and then mourning over Yerushalayim, and now lastly over the Makom HaMikdash, where we have to recite this pasuk and we have to rice kria. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Hey, Beis HaMikdash, when you see the Makom HaMikdash. Now, what's called the Makom HaMikdash? So if you look at Dirshu footnote number 4, Uma nechshav riyas Beis HaMikdash le'inyan zeh. What constitutes seeing the Makom HaMikdash in the context of this halacha? Kasav b'Sefer Eretz Yisroel. Once again, he brings down this Sefer Eretz Yisroel, which apparently this Rav Tutsinski wrote a sefer addressing these halachos. I'm not familiar with it, but obviously it's they keep turning to him. Shadavka kisharoyas ritzpas ha'azora nechshav adavar k'ri'iyas hamikdash v'chayiv b'kria al kach. He writes that you could only be said to really be seeing the Makom HaMikdash when you see the Makom, when you see the ground where the Azara was, which you can't see from the Kaisel Plaza. I mean, from my memories of Eretz Yisroel, you could see that if you go up to Har HaZeisim. You go up to Har HaZeisim and you look down, now you could see the Makom of the Azara. But not if you see the Harabayas or you see the walls around the Harabayas like the Kaisel. So Rav Tutsinski in his sefer writes that seeing the Kaisel would not constitute seeing the Makom HaMikdash. Achein, however, Hosef he adds, Sha'al Re'iyas Kipas HaMizged Sha'al Harabayas, by seeing that gold dome that towers over the Harabayas, Nebuch Bavin Yisaydo Rabbim, the Bach writes, the Pashulchan writes that you write kria over that. The Chain see that again Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, and so Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Zechet Tzaddik V'Kosher Levracha, was also inclined to be of the same opinion. Me'yidach, however, on the other hand, B'Shalos Teshuvas Igris Moshe, the Yeshiva Zatzal writes in Yigris, Mashma, it's implied, Sha'af Misha Bala Kaisel Ma'aravi. If somebody comes to the Kaisel, and he cannot see the ground of the area of the Azara, he does have to rise kria, and that was the minig of the Chazon Ish, as well as the Stipler Goyen, and so too I have heard that is the minig of Reb Ruvain as well. Okay, so the Mishnah Berurah says here, a nice cut in hay, Beis HaMikdash, somebody who goes nowadays up onto the Harabayas, to the Makom HaMikdash, chayiv kares, is chayiv kares, shekulanu tamei mesim, because we all are considered to be tamei meis. We've all gone to cemeteries, we've all gone to levayas, we've all gone to funeral homes, so we're all considered to be tamei meis, and you're not allowed to be nichnas to the kodesh. You can't go to the Makom HaMikdash if you're tamei meis. Kedusha Rishona Kitcha L'Shaita, and the Kedusha Rishona, when Shlomo HaMelech was Mekadesh the Harabayas, that Kedusha Rishona Kitcha L'Shaita V'Kitcha Lasit Lavai, it was affected for its time, and it continued to be in effect for all future dairos. Okay, let's take a look here in Dirshu footnote number 5. As far as going into the Makom HaMikdash nowadays, even to go up onto the Harabayas, not precisely in the Makom HaMikdash, outside of the boundaries of the Azara. Kasvu Hagoyin Reb Kanievsky, the Stipler Goyin, V'Hagoyin Reb Elazar Manshach, Zechet Tzaddik V'Kosher Levracha. So the Stipler Goyin and Reb Shach Zatzal, the great Goyinim of Eretz Yisroel, of the past generations, of the earlier generations, Sha'asr, they both write that it is totally asr to go up onto the Harabayas, even if you think that you're staying outside of the boundaries of the Azara itself, of the Makom HaMikdash itself. And he goes on in the first paragraph of this footnote to write that one of the reasons for this is because there's a suffix, you might have the tumah of a zav, you might be a zav, and if you're a zav, you can only become tar if you keep shiva nikiyim and all the other halachos. So it's definitely, they write that it is outright usher to go up onto the Harabayas. In the second paragraph of this footnote, very interesting paragraph, they bring down some halachos. What do you do if you're a soldier in the IDF and you need to go up onto the Harabayas, and it's a tzarech pikuach nefesh, if you have to go up, should you comport yourself? Now let's go to the third paragraph of this footnote. This is a shaila that comes up very often when people go to Eretz Yisroel. How close are you allowed to approach the kaisel itself? HaChazon Ish Amar Lagoyin Reb Chaim Kanievsky, it's brought down over here that the Chazon Ish told Reb Chaim Kanievsky, Zal Zayin Gesund, Shemuter lehiskarev ad hakaisel, that you're allowed to come up all the way to the kaisel. Kevin shekaisel zeh hainu shal harabayis, because the kaisel was the wall around the harabayis. V'loy shal beis hamikdash, it wasn't the wall of the beis hamikdash. Some people make that mistake. They think that it's the wall, that it's a wall actually of the beis hamikdash. No, it's the wall surrounding the harabayis. Therefore, when you stand by the kaisel ha'ma'aravi, you're standing outside the precincts of the harabayis. You're not trespassing upon the harabayis itself. However, you should not stick your fingers in to like those crevices in the wall where people stick papers. He brings down over here that the Chazon Ish said you should not stick your fingers in those crevices. However, move a sham, it's brought down there. The Chazon Ish himself was known to stay away somewhat from the kaisel. He went up to 11 amos away from the kaisel. The Arlutzian writes, you can even put your fingers in the crevices. And so says Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, that he never saw people that should be makbid on not putting their fingers in between the stones of the kaisel. Okay. We got to the end of Dirshu of Mishnah Berurah Eis Katan Hay, where the Mishnah Berurah brought down the concept that Kedusha Rishayna Kitchel L'Shaita V'Kitchel L'Asid Lavai. And if you take a look at footnote number 6, Harbe Rishaynim Pasku Shekedusha Sabayis Le'Bitla B'Zman Hazeh. This is the opinion of many Rishaynim that the Kedusha of the Beis HaMikdash is still in force nowadays. Kerambam Perik Yutes Mehilchas Maisar Kabanos Halacha Tezvav, who writes that specifically. He writes Kedusha Rishayna Kitchel L'Shaita Kitchel L'Asid Lavai. That's the way the Rambam paskins. This is a machlokes amaroim, but the Rambam paskins like this opinion. And therefore, anichtas l'sham bizmanenu chayv kares. Somebody who would go up on harabayis nowadays would be chayv kares. Okay. Mishnah Berurah is katan vav v'kria. So when you come to see the Makom HaMikdash, you have to write kria. Ayin Bach, the Bach writes, Shechayev lehishtachavos. It's not only a question of a formality of rice and kriya. Shechayev lehishtachavos. You should bow down. V'lekrayas begodav, and to tear your clothing. V'livkais, and to cry. Ulehis einain, and to groan. Ulehis abel, and to mourn. Al churban beis hamikdash, over the loss, over the destruction of the beis hamikdash. Ulekainain, and to say kinais, to wail. V'loimer, and to say the capital Tilim, capital Ayin Tes, Mizmor La'asaf, Elokim Bo Goyim Benachal Asecha, Ad Seif, the entire capital. Ukishikareya, and when you write kria over the Beis Hamikdash, Mivarech, you make a bracha v'omer, and you say Baruch Dayna Emes, Ach Bali Shemu Malchus. You don't say Elokeinu Melech HaOlam. You just say Baruch Dayna Emes, Kichal Mishpatav Tzedek, all of his judgments are righteous, the Emes and truthful. Hatzur, our rock, Tamim Pa'aloi, complete are all of his deeds. Kichal Drachav Mishpat, all of his ways are Mishpat. Keil Amuna, faithful God. Ve'ein Avel, there's nothing that's twisted or corrupted. Tzadik, he's righteous. V'yasharhu, he's straight. V'ata tzadik al ka'aba aleinu, and we're matzdik the din, and we say, Rabbeinu Yerushalayim, you are righteous, you're the tzadik for everything that has befallen us in this long, horrifying, horrible galus. It's because of our HaTorah. Because of our HaTorah, that's why we see Yerushalayim and the Makom HaMikdash b'churbanoi. The Rebbeinu Shalom should have rachmanas on us. But we have to do tshuva, Rabbi say. It's not a question of the Rebbeinu Shalom having rachmanas on us. The Rebbeinu Shalom is a rachman. But we have to do tshuva. We have to know what it means to want to live like a Torah Yid, to live the life of a Yid. And it's not enough that we want Mashiach to come. We have to want Mashiach to come for the right reasons. We want the Geula to come, not because we want our lives to be easier, not because we don't want to be oppressed. We want Mashiach to come because we want to be able to keep all the Torah mitzvahs. We want Mashiach to come because we want to be able to live the Torah life that the Rebbeinu Shalom wants us to live. We want Mashiach to come because we want to be memala our tafkid. We want to be able to fulfill that which the Rebbeinu Shalom made us a mamleches kahana v'goy kadosh for, to live a certain type of life. We have to want that. We have to want to live a life of having Mashiach and having a Beis HaMikdash, of Kachim and of Taris and of a Sanhedrin and of Batei Din and with Malchus in full force and keeping all the halachos that we have to keep. That's the life that we want. If we want that, then we strive for that, then the Rebbeinu Shalom will have Rachmanus and the Rebbeinu Shalom will bring the Bria Skel Tzedek from Herav Yameinu. Now we go back to the Shulchan Aruch. The Mechaber says, right before the ice cut and Zion for the Mishnah Berurah, the Mechaber says, Umeheichan chayav l'kria. From what point, when you reach which point, are you chayav to be kria over Yerushalayim? Min ha-tzayfim, from the area known as tzayfim. That's for Yerushalayim. You write kria of Yerushalayim when you reach tzayfim. Says the Mishnah Berurah cut and Zion min ha-tzayfim. Pirish d'loichashiv re'iyah me'richuk makam. It's not called re'iyah when you're far away. Ela mishigia l'tzayfim. You have to reach tzayfim. What's tzayfim? Says the Chavetz Chaim, Dehu makam samach l'Yerushalayim. That was an area close to Yerushalayim. Once you reach that area, chashiv re'iyah, that's called that now you have seen Yerushalayim b'churbana, and that's when you write kria. Can't cuss Beis Yosef. So writes to Beis Yosef. Now, truth is, then this is what the Chavetz Chaim is about to bring down, that the identity of tzayfim, this is brought down from a brisa in Moed Katan. And in Moed Katan, I think it's on Mem Tes Amud Aleph, in Moed Katan, there's a machlekes rishonim what tzayfim means. Rashi says that tzayfim was a place. Tzayfim literally means the lookout. When you reach the area of the lookout, Rashi says there was a place called tzayfim. Tosfos says tzayfim doesn't refer to a specific place. It means from anywhere where you could see Yerushalayim. That's called tzayfim. Aval kama paiskim kasvu the tzayfim have a pirushay kamakayim savev Yerushalayim shayechel lirais bisham. Anywhere where you could see Yerushalayim. That's the sheet of Tosfos. Oid kasvu they also write the mishiagiel tzayfim tzarich lekria. When you reach tzayfim, you have to write kria. Afal pisha dain loy ra'isa. Even if maybe it's cloudy, I don't know, but you still didn't see Yerushalayim. Once you reach tzayfim, you have to write kria. Kasav el yarabba kol shekara v'ra k'tzas. If you write kria and you were able to see a little bit, avshel ra b'toiv, even though you couldn't see well, kishiyagia, when you reach Yerushalayim, ein tzarich lekria oid. You don't have to write kria again. However, lechatchila you should wait until you reach tzayfim. And again, I told you the minig of the Divrei Yatziv, the Klosenberger, and what I've heard from the Feinsteins, is to close your eyes. Once you already reach the point of a suffix, close your eyes, get to the kaisel, and then write kriya over the kaisel, which is the Makom HaMikdash, according to Rav Moshe. Okay. Now we go weiter in the Shulchan Aruch. V'achakach kishiyira hamikdash, when you see the Makom HaMikdash, karea kara acher. So if you don't close your eyes, so when you came to the tzayfim, when you came and you could see the old city, so you write kriya of Yerushalayim. Then when you reach the Makom HaMikdash, you're going to write kriya again. The chol kriya tefach, and each kriya should be a tefach, approximately 3 to 4 inches. V'imba derech hamidbar, I don't know precisely what this means. If you're approaching Yerushalayim from the midbar, sha'az roya hamikdash tchila. Apparently, if you come that way, you're going to see the Makom HaMikdash before you see the rest of Yerushalayim. Karei al hamikdash tefach. Then you would write kriya over the Makom HaMikdash at tefach. V'achakach kishiyir Yerushalayim. Then when you see Yerushalayim, ma'asav al kararishan kolshu. You just add on a minute amount. So again, if you follow this minig of closing your eyes, I guess you would write kriya by the Makom HaMikdash, and then when you leave the kaisel and you go out to Yerushalayim, into the Ir HaAtika, you would be ma'asef a kolshu. You would expand, you would, I guess, make another kriya of a kolshu, just a drop. I don't know, it says ma'asef al kararishan. That doesn't mean, so I'm sorry, not you're going to make another kriya. It's not another kriya, it's like I said the first time. You expand the kriya that you made over the Makom HaMikdash, you expand over upon that kriya a drop, a kolshu. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Ches. Kara acher, when you now see Yerushalayim, you'll reach another kria. Kara acher, this is going on the case where if you first riced kria over Yerushalayim and then you saw the Makom HaMikdash, then you need kara acher, then you need a new kria. V'yarchik shalosh etzbais. And this new kria that you're going to tear over the Makom HaMikdash should be 3 etzbais, 3 finger widths away from the original kria that you made over Yerushalayim. However, if you see the Makom HaMikdash first, and then you see Yerushalayim, then you expand on the original kria that you made over the Makom HaMikdash. You add a kolshu, you add a minute amount. Ve'in tzarich tefach, but you don't need to rice kria another tefach. Mishum de ikar mitzvahs kria yotza b'pam rishona, because the main mitzvah of ricing kria you already accomplished when you riced kria over the Makom HaMikdash. Shehim in HaMikdash, shektujasa yosem Yerushalayim, which is more elevated in kedusha over Yerushalayim. V'nichleles b'saycha. So when you riced kria over the Makom HaMikdash, you really include in there ricing kria over Yerushalayim. So you only have to expand on the kria that you made, a minute amount. Siv Gimel. Imkara al achas me Ari Yehuda. If you did rice kria over one of the Ari Yehuda, Einar chayzer v'kareya k'sheyira shar Ari Yehuda. You don't now go ahead and rice another kria when you see another one of the Ari Yehuda. Chutz mi Yerushalayim, with the exception of Yerushalayim, shechayzer v'kareya aleha kara acher b'ftei atzmai. If you, let's say, according to those who riced kria over Chevron, if somebody went to Chevron first and he riced kria over Chevron, then he came to Yerushalayim, he would rice kria again over Yerushalayim. V'im kara Yerushalayim tchila, but if you riced kria on Yerushalayim first, einoi tzarich lekroya al shar Ari Yehuda, then you certainly would not rice kria on any one of the other Ari Yehuda. Says the Mishnah is cutting yodein chayzer v'kereh k'sheyireh dekulu chashuvais ka'achas. Once you riced kria once over one of the Ari Yehuda, you covered all your bases for all of the Ari Yehuda. You're not going to rice kria again for another one of the Ari Yehuda because they're all considered to be on the same level. So when you riced kria on one Ari Yehuda, you covered all the Ari Yehuda. Nevertheless, says the Chavetz Chaim, you do have to expand on the original kria that you made. On the first Ari Yehuda, you should expand upon it a kolshu. If you riced kria over Yerushalayim, then you don't rice kria at all over any of the other Ari Yehuda, and you don't even have to expand on it even a little bit. Okay. Siv Dalet. Kol ha-kiraim ha'elu, all of these kriyas that we're learning about, when you tear your garments, biyodai, you're supposed to do it with your hands, not with a keli. You don't cut it with a scissor. You could start the cut with a razor blade just so that you should be able to rip it. But the kria is supposed to tear it with your hands. That's a symbol of mourning, not making a nice neat slit with a razor blade. So you can make a tiny cut to open it up, and then you rip it with your hands. And mu'umad, and you're supposed to be standing when you rice kria. V'kareh kol ksusai sha'alav, you have to rip all of the garments that are on you, ad sheyigala es libay, until you expose your heart. And you're never allowed to repair these kiraim, these tears. You're not allowed to mend them. Alval rashai, it is mutter, l'shalalan, to pinch them together, l'malalan, to fold them, l'laktan, to gather them, u'letafran kimin sulamais, and to make basting stitches, very large, coarse stitches, so that they will look like a ladder. Let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah here. I was cutting your base, yadai. You're supposed to rice kria with your hands, v'loi b'kli, not with any kind of cutting implement. Es liba, you have to uncover, you have to expose your heart. V'lachein yikra mitzat smile. Therefore, the kria is done on the left side, like somebody who rices kria over the loss of a parent. Also, that kria is done on the left side. Ki alev b'smile, because we know that the heart is towards the left of the body. Yodalid ma'ache, you're not allowed to mend these tears. The Torah describes this mending as a very professional type of mending, and I think he's referring in his words here to a type of mending that's referenced in the Brisa in Moed Katan, where it says, Ichoi shel Alexandria, a very professional type of mending where they pinched the fabric together, stitched it from the inside, and then used very fine stitches on top, on the outside, to pull the fabric together completely, and you never could see that there was any kind of rip. Others say that's the words that the Mishnah Berurah is using here. Tfira mi bifnim, stitching on the inside, va'acheres aleha mi bachutz, and other stitching on the outside. For Rashi Pirish Tfira mi yusheres, Rashi says that this just means professional mending, nice, clean, straight stitches. You are allowed, on the other hand, tesvav, l'shalalon, these types of stitchings that are mentioned here in the Mechaber that you're allowed to do, they're all coarse type of repairs. They're not clean, professional repairs at all. And the Mishnah Berurah adds in over here a nice cut in tesvav, lemachar. You could do these types of amateuristic, coarse types of mending. You could do them the next day, not on the same day that you actually tore them. As cotton tezayin, you could use stitches that are like sulamais, like a ladder. So there's a machlokes rishonim how to understand that. The Chavetz Chaim brings down over here tfirai she'enon miyusharos. It means stitches that are not straight. Other rishonim say it means very big stitches that look like the rungs of a ladder. Okay, Siv Hey. Hayalechu ba Yerushalayim, hayalechu ba tayshleishim yom. Let's say somebody is in Eretz Yisroel and he's traveling back and forth to Yerushalayim. So within a 30-day period, he's going many times back and forth into Yerushalayim and out of Yerushalayim. Says the Mechaber, Eina kria acher. He doesn't rice kria again every time he comes to Yerushalayim. V'em la'achar shloishim yom. If he missed 30 days that he wasn't in Yerushalayim, then kaiser v'kria. Then he would rice a new kria when he goes to Yerushalayim after 30 days. For hu adin bar Yehuda v'Mikdash, and the same halacha applies to those who rice kria over the Ari Yehuda and to rice kria over the Makom HaMikdash. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut in Yud Zayin. Hayahaylechu ba v'haraya Yerushalayim tayshleishim yom. Somebody who does see Yerushalayim again within 30 days, af al pi shaloi kara, even though he doesn't rice kria, kigon shedar b'saychai. Let's say he lives in Yerushalayim. He sees Yerushalayim every day. When he opens up his eyes, lucky him. Ein sarach lekria al Ari Yehuda. He doesn't have to rice kria on Ari Yehuda if he goes out of Yerushalayim and he sees one of the Ari Yehuda. Imloi sheyatzam yisham ubal Ari Yehuda lachash leishim yom. Unless he leaves Yerushalayim and he goes to a destination that's not one of the Ari Yehuda, and he waits there for 30 days, and then after 30 days he sees one of the Ari Yehuda. Then he gets into the shaila of rice kria on Ari Yehuda. But if somebody lives in Yerushalayim, and then he leaves Yerushalayim and goes to Hebron, if we're going to consider Hebron to be one of the Ari Yehuda, he's not going to rice kria on Hebron, because he was just in Yerushalayim. And now, very interesting, says the Chavetz Chaim, Umisha noiled b'Yerushalayim. Somebody who was fortunate enough to be born in Yerushalayim, afilu higdil, even when he becomes a gadol. So he lives in Yerushalayim. On the day, when he's a cotton, he's not mechuyev to rice kria. Now, when he becomes a gadol, does he rice kria? Says the Chavetz Chaim, no. Umisha noiled b'Yerushalayim, afilu higdil, ain't tzarich lekria. He doesn't have to rice kria when he becomes a gadol. The bekatnusai potter, because when he was a cotton, he was potter in rice and kria. Ukeshehigdil, and then when he becomes bar mitzvah, ain't tzarich lekria. He doesn't have to rice kria. The haraya is on tayshleishim yom, because he's within 30 days of when he last saw Yerushalayim. So if he was born in Yerushalayim and he stays in Yerushalayim, he never rices kria. Now they bring down an interesting shiloh. Why isn't such a person, somebody who was born in Yerushalayim, why doesn't he have to rice kria when he's a cotton out of a chiyuv of chinuch? Why aren't we mechanech him when he's a cotton that he should rice kria? When he's 10 years old, we should bring him to the kaisel and tell him, there's a din of chinuch. I have to rice kriya by the kaisel. You have to rice kriya by the kaisel. So if you take a look in the back, in the Dirshu, in the Miluim, on page 24, in Dirshu footnote number 12, he writes over here, V'af b'shum mitzvahs chinuch, even though you might think that there's a mitzvah of chinuch to train the cotton to rice kriya, das ha-goyin Kenyevsky, it was the opinion of the Stipler Goyin, she'ein tzarich lechanech es haktanim lekriya, that we don't have to be mechanech the ketanim to rice kriya. V'chein das ha-goyin Reb Yosef Shalom al Yashiv, Rabbi Yashav also said not. You know why? Very interesting. Let's remember that the point of chinuch is that we want to train him when he's young so that he should know what he has to do when he's older. He says over here that doesn't apply. Because we hope we hope that by the time this child becomes a gadol, the Beis HaMikdash will be rebuilt and he won't have to rice kria. So we don't want to train him when he's a cotton to rice kria, when he's a gadol, because we hope it won't be negeya. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schus of limud HaTorah should be megan against Klal Yisrael. Especially want to mention, people should have in mind to be mispal for a chayla Yisrael Tzvi ben Ruchama Edel Roiza should have a refuah shalema. So that's Yisrael Tzvi ben Ruchama Edel Roiza. The schus of limud HaTorah. You should also have a refuah shalema besides Shar Chayla Yisrael. And the Rebbeinu Shalom should have Rachmanas of Klal Yisrael. These halachos should not be negay anymore. He should bring us me'afela la'ira. Should bring us to a time of simcha. We should be zeichet to see the Bias Girl Tzedek b'meher v'yameinu. Be well.